Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my city of Chicago. Very happy to have a conference here. Makes it a little easier when you don't have to travel very far. Let's see, my name is Rachel Hyman. I am a senior software engineer at Superhuman, and I keep feeling like I should not be at this conference. For about 8 years, I was an iOS engineer. So, not a software engineer, not even a mobile engineer. iOS was what I did. Then about a year ago, I had the good fortune to switch over to the dark side, and I've learned a lot along the way and would like to just share some of those learnings with you all. So, okay, introduction time. On the left is me in some Al Jazeera America B-roll. So that's a news network, some footage from a news network at a boot camp where I was learning to code for the first time in 2014. If you did a CSI style zoom on that screen, you would probably see some iOS documentation or something on Apple's website. This is what I did for years and years and years. iOS was just, pretty much the only thing I knew, the only game in town for me. I even gave talks at conferences like 360 iDev in Denver. And then on the right, you can kind of see on the top is a graph of my GitHub contributions in my company's Android repo. So you can kind of see it's nothing, 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 and then the orange spikes start about exactly a year ago. And then, here I am at this conference talking to you all. So I want to talk about a couple things in a couple categories 15 things that I've learned by making this switch. So this is a technical conference. So first we're going to talk about some technical observations I have switching over from iOS to Android. Then we're going to move on to process learnings, every developer's favorite topic, process. But I think, making that switch, I've learned a lot about just how to be a better software engineer and how to work with other people. So we will go through those. And then saving the best for last, I have personal learnings. So this is kind of the big finish for me. Just talking about what it means to learn a new thing and to just kind of start all over when you were already really good at something, but then you're bad again, which is a process that we've all been through with learning to code or learning to do Android development. And then we'll sum it all up, and if there's time, Q&A. So yes, part one is going to be some technical learnings. So the very first thing I want to talk about is how I learned to pay attention to patterns. So there's a lot that is very similar between iOS and Android. What are some of those things? We've got Swift in iOS, Kotlin in Android. These things, are very similar. So they are open source. They are type safe, more type safe perhaps than their predecessors, Objective-C and Java. They care about, user delight and being easy to learn. And in fact, these are so similar that somebody even made a website called Swift is like Kotlin. So I took a video just to show how much stuff is on this website. The link is on the bottom there. So there's just syntax-wise, there's just a lot in common. And so it made it kind of easier to make that switch, although, obviously some things are a little different. But yeah, long website. And what else is similar? So let's see here. We have kind of these technologies to do structured concurrency in both iOS and in Android. So iOS has async await. Kotlin has coroutines, among other things. Doing asynchronous coding used to be really a pain in the butt on the iOS side for sure. I imagine the same on the Android side. We just had a pyramid of doom with callbacks on callbacks. And these things basically, look more like synchronous code. So those are similar. And then what else? We've got these declarative UI frameworks, Swift UI, Jetpack Compose. Everybody likes to talk about how, these things are the future. Basically, I don't think it's necessarily inherently interesting to talk about how things are similar. There was already that website that I showed, and it's not really what I'm up here to talk about. The point I really want to make here is that there seems to just be patterns that are emerging in the respective platforms, iOS and Android, towards declarative UI, towards maybe a more functional style of programming. I know when I was on the iOS side, I had learned Objective-C. Swift came out in 2014, a couple months later, and there was just sort of this like reticence to learn it on my side because I was like, oh, it's a whole new thing. Like, is this thing going to be the future? And I see that conversation all the time with Swift UI and with Jetpack Compose, where it's like, well, like, do we fully commit to these new technologies? But I think, seeing kind of both sides of the coin gave me a little more confidence in the technical decisions that we make at my company, and just kind of more confidence to say, like this is sort of just the direction like mobile as a whole seems to be moving in, not just Android, not just iOS, but it's kind of a theme. So that brings us to point number 2. Same, but different. What does this mean? So this is a phrase in Thai English. So speakers of English who are in Thailand. And it just kind of expresses this sort of hand-wavy concept of like, yeah, two things are like kind of similar, but also kind of different, but the same, but also different. And it just kind of expresses like this gut feeling that I have when I think about, what it felt like to do iOS versus what it felt like to do Android, or feels like. So what are some examples of how Android is different and why that matters? So, people talk about fragmentation a lot. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I think people are probably tired of hearing about it, and I have my doubts about how much this is still, an important thing because iOS has lots of different form factors and in a way that they didn't used to. But point being, OS on the left is iOS adoption of new OSs. On the right is Android. This is from about a year ago. It's really small, but the point here is that the blue is the newest OS for iOS and Android, and you can kind of just see the blue piece of the pie is a lot bigger on iOS. So you just can't really make assumptions about, like everybody is going to upgrade to the new OS. There's just a lot more distribution, and so that might affect the APIs we can use or target or so on. Then we've got, of course, devices and form factors. So these are just screenshots I took from Apple's website and then Samsung and Pixel device makers' websites. So again, you don't really have to like read all these. You can kind of just see there are a lot more devices on the right with just 2 device makers than on the left with Apple. So how this like manifested in my day-to-day, I have a OnePlus test device, and we were seeing really weird bugs with the app on just my device. It was really hard, impossible really to repro for anyone else. And yeah, basically just, it had to do more with the OS than maybe the device itself. But, I kind of realized, there's just, it's a bigger universe of devices and possibilities. And so, that can make things tricky especially when you have bugs coming in from, people who have devices that you don't have or can't emulate in some ways. So a sort of more code-based example where this came up is in talking about app lifecycle. So on the left is sort of a diagram of just the basic iOS app lifecycle. On the right is Android. So I just kind of naively assumed like, they're both mobile platforms. They probably act kind of similar. They probably treat state restoration really similarly. And that's not the case. We use Jetpack Compose and a lot of other new stuff at Superhuman. And basically, we were seeing weird things where we would background the app and then come back and everything was recomposing. And, something that would have worked with the same approach in iOS was just not working in Android. So the lesson here that, I hope to impart is just these things are different. It's not necessarily interesting or insightful to say they are different. The important thing is like, okay, so what do we do about it? It was helpful to me to take a step back and kind of just work on my mental model and just mental understanding of how the Android system worked and how, various keywords or concepts like remember might have been different or might not even have an analog in the iOS side. And to not just, like I said, naively assume that these two things were going to be the same. There's lots of similarities. There's also differences, but the upshot here, I guess, is that, these are really complex systems, and it helped me to switch over by basically just having a better understanding of, the top level view of that system. So yeah, that is kind of related to the third point here, which is about something I'm calling levels of understanding. So especially, because I switched over, I'd had previous coding experience, the expectation maybe is that you can kind of just hit the ground running. And, like I said, Swift and Kotlin really similar. So you can just get things done that maybe a junior developer or somebody that is entirely new to coding wouldn't be able to get done. And I realized I was falling into this trap almost where, there would be other code in the project, in the Android project, and I wouldn't really entirely understand what it was doing. So it was like, oh, by remember mutable state of, these keywords are all strung together. And, it seems like that might be the right choice to make here because it's just adding another property to, a composable view or something like that. So that is what I would term kind of surface level understanding. You can sort of spot these patterns and you can say, this seems like the right place to apply that pattern or to apply this code. And I say surface and not superficial because there is a place for that kind of understanding. You kind of have to start somewhere. It's how a lot of people learn is maybe copying code from Stack Overflow and then tweaking it or just changing code and seeing what changes in the app. And that's a place to start, but what has really helped me is to kind of work on deepening the understanding in areas that seem important. So, with coroutines, it was like, yeah, I can kind of write this thing, pass in a scope, vaguely understand what's going on, but, maybe not really understand the implications or, how the app is going to act in different scenarios. So, I think there's certain areas when you're learning a new thing where you can get by with this more surface level of understanding. But something that helped me just feel a little more comfortable in Android is being like, okay, I don't really get this and it feels wrong that I don't really get this. So I'm going to take a step back. I am going to, read the documentation or read a tutorial. And that is what has helped me feel a little more fluent, basically, in the Android world. Cool. So we're going to move on now to some process learnings and things that I've just realized, as I've been going through this whole process of learning a new domain. Number 4 is making technical decisions is hard. There's kind of no way around this, especially if you're working with new technology, as we are, with coroutines and Jetpack Compose. Sometimes we would decide to build a thing a certain way, or we structured this whole navigation system, and it was all built on strings and routing. And, we kind of realized at Superhuman that we made some mistakes. So something really cool that we did and that I would love to recommend to you all is having basically a code retro. So I know a lot of us do agile development. We're probably used to having project retros where we just talk about, process as a whole. But we just sort of self-organized. We're a team of 3. We're very small, so it was very easy to just get together and say okay, so here's the current state of things. Here's what's really working and what feels really easy to accomplish when we're building new screens and stuff. And here's what's a pain in the butt. Here is what is a pain point. And this had the really fortuitous side effect of, we were working together to describe what the system looked like in the first place. And that sort of just helped me understand like what the patterns were, code patterns and architecture in our app, and what kind of aligning with the other developers on, this is like annoying, but maybe this is just how Android is. So it was a really good way as a new person to Android to just get feedback on like, this is just kind of how we have to do things in Compose or in Android versus, yes, everybody finds this annoying and we are going to try to redo it. So it was really affirming almost to have this meeting and to say like, yeah, we maybe like didn't get it right the first time, but prioritizing, refactoring, and refactoring is a scary term and people sometimes don't like refactoring, or it's hard to prioritize refactoring. But I think, when it has a clear benefit and it's like, oh, it's going to make such and such tasks or navigation or whatever it is easier to do, it helps basically like care in a way about the code a little more, and just helps you realize that you're sort of a steward of the code for yourself, for the team, for future developers. So, okay, number 5 is called the siren sounds of prior art. So this is Bjork. She's an Icelandic musician. She has a sort of famous screenshot from an interview where she says, "You shouldn't let poets lie to you." So that is true. You also shouldn't let developers lie to you. What does that mean? We are building an Android app in my company from the ground up, working on the first beta right now. iOS app, on the other hand, has existed for years. When we are trying to figure out how to build, a feature and just port it over, oftentimes the iOS app is a starting point to figure out what is the business logic, like, what are the ins and outs of this feature. But sometimes it becomes more than just a starting point. It becomes like the model for implementation. And kind of like what I was saying with, making technical decisions is hard. Nobody is infallible. Just because it is in an app and it's working for them doesn't mean, the port is the best solution. So in some cases, this is true. Our app is very functional offline, and so we have, ways of dealing with that, like a modifier queue. And so like we brought that over, and that was something that made sense. But for other things, it was just, I even found myself falling into this pattern where it was like, I would just look at the iOS code and I was trying to do all these things. I was trying to figure out, what the requirements were for this feature. I might not have had a lot of information. So it's like, what are the entry points? What is the UI like? And then I just, because iOS was where I had felt most comfortable, it was like, I would write up a technical plan and it would just kind of be like the same implementation, but in Kotlin with Jetpack Compose and not in Swift and so on. So I think the lesson here is, it's very valuable if you're lucky enough to have another platform where a feature is working, whether it's a desktop app or an iOS app or something else. But sometimes it can just be really limiting to have that example, because as soon as you see it, it just becomes hard to imagine anything else. It's like, you read a book, they make a movie out of the book, they cast these actors, and maybe you had a vision in your head of what the characters in the book look like. But as soon as, this movie comes out, there's no, it destroys everything else. That's just the canonical version of what a character looks like. So, the book is better. And the example here would be sometimes your own implementation might be superior. So taking a step back can be really helpful. Number 6, scope is love, scope is life. So I kind of mentioned, we are building the first version of this app. Sometimes, maybe we have designs, maybe we have the original document where a feature was planned out, but as developers, we have to write technical plans, and that kind of involves knowing, what the features are and what the kind of scope, I guess, or outer bound of the feature is that you're building in the first place. I can sometimes get really easily distracted or be like, oh, like, this thing feels kind of peripheral, but it's related to a feature. So we're just going to throw it in the technical plan. And that has not exactly served me well, because that's like how scope balloons, and then nobody is happy. So something that was really helpful for me when I have been building features on an Android app is just to start by just understanding, outside of the code piece, what a feature is composed of. So, entry points, different cases or conditions that might come up, different screens, error states, offline states, and just kind of fully documenting all of that. I know everybody has a different process, and maybe you're getting full fleshed out requirements from your product team or whoever. But it's just generally benefited me, especially as I am learning a new thing and can easily sort of feel like, oh, I have to build all of this and then everything outside of that as well, to say like, no, this is what this feature is going to consist of, writing it down, getting buy-in from product people, from designers, and just kind of getting everyone on the same page about what is going to be built versus what is going to be, kicked down the road or solved later. So that brings me to number 7, know your stakeholders. I mentioned the Android team is really small. We have people at the company who have Android devices, and generally people are really excited to get on builds. That has been really helpful to just sort of distribute it beyond the immediate auspices of our team. We have found bugs. For example, somebody said like, oh, your app, like the app is burning through a bunch of my data. And because, when we're developing this, we're sitting at our computers, we are connected to Wi-Fi, we might be using an emulator and not a device. There's just kind of a whole class of bugs that we just like wouldn't have caught at all. So as with all things, this kind of comes with like caveats. We have found it helpful to just limit the number of people that are on these early builds, because we're building things kind of piecewise, like screen by screen, and sometimes people will, try to format an email a certain way or show an email or something. And basically, it's an email app that I work on. And it can be kind of tedious to say like, oh, like we actually haven't built this yet, and just like, spend too long level setting with everyone. So, it's helpful to just expand the pool of people who are testing your app, because people will use it in different ways and break it in ways that you didn't even know were possible. But just kind of limiting that. And we have a phased strategy for like, okay, first we're going to start with the small group at the company, and then open it to everyone at the company, and then a limited number of customers outside of the internal org. And I think that that can be really helpful to just control the volume and whatnot of bugs that are coming in. So point number 8 here is always be triaging. Learn this the hard way. When people are using the app, everybody has kind of the version in their head of what the app should be or should look like or how it should work. And when people post bugs in Slack or file bugs in our, task manager system, they provide information, and you're sort of like, oh, like, I built this, I feel like it should work, especially if you owned a feature. It's kind of like, oh, like, I have to go on this side quest. I have to go fix this thing. I have to put down what I'm doing and like, see what's going on. In most cases, just because something is posted right away in in a Slack room, does not mean it is urgent. It's been very helpful to me to realize that something might be broken, but that doesn't mean it needs to be. It's not a drop everything, 5-alarm fire, fix the thing. So there's a time and place for bugs like that. Hopefully, you have a pager duty system, or if your app is already out in the wild. But generally, just kind of having a set of criteria by which we decide, okay, this needs to be looked at today, maybe not right now, but today or this week, or prioritized in the next sprint, has kind of just helped me feel I can focus on, the thing I was already working on, which is really important, is just having that focus. Basically just not getting distracted with these side quests, because when I felt really frenzied and overwhelmed, and just despairing in a way about how much is on my plate or how much I have to learn, generally it means that I am not focusing, or maybe there is too much on my plate. Maybe I'm just pulling or getting pulled into other tasks. And I think some of that is within our control. So that brings me to personal learnings, my favorite section. So the first one here is that learning is painful, as you can tell from this distressed looking lady here. There were moments where I'd switched over and I was like, I am just really bad at this. It's not even just Android that I'm bad at. I am bad at software engineering. I should quit this and go out into the wilderness and switch careers, and just kind of having these moments where I was questioning everything. I think that when we talk about learning a new thing, we are kind of thinking of ourselves as being on the other side of it. We went through a struggle and, but we got through it. We learned the thing. We are good at the thing now. It's kind of similar to how people talk about failure. It's always after they have had success, here they are reflecting on their failures. And I think that just sometimes does a disservice to just mentally and emotionally how tough it is to start from the beginning. I kind of hinged my whole identity on being, a senior software engineer and being good at what I did, which was specifically iOS engineering. And then, I switched over, and there was a lot of being bad at things and not being able to figure things out and having to ask for help and, not knowing what I didn't know. So I think the more we normalize that and make, a safe environment for people to struggle and, just go through the pain of learning, because it is unavoidable in certain ways. I think that is well established, that it's hard to learn new things in many ways, not just hard, to learn how to code or learn how to code a new thing, but just perception wise, it can be really challenging. So that is kind of big message here is, it's hard, it's painful, but you will make it through. That's how you get better. Something that was really helpful for me on this journey that I'm still on is not comparing myself to other people. So, like I said, I work with 2 other Android engineers. They are senior, they have had a lot of Android experience, and I found myself often using the word should. So I should be able to finish this task in this amount of time, or I should know how to fix this bug without struggling and trying all these things and just running out of steam and spinning my wheels. And my manager shared, this piece of advice, which was really helpful. So instead of doing these shoulds and comparing yourself to the other people on the team who just have a different skill set and different level of experience, look at yourself from 6 months ago. Look at the PRs you were opening then, and the kinds of bugs you were solving then, and the smaller features you were doing then, and look at where you are now. I think when we're in the thing, we're in the tunnel and having the tunnel vision, it's just hard to sort of take a step back and have that perspective. Yeah, I mean, even if, you happen to be more senior and you're working with senior people, I think this is still a helpful message, because like people are good at different things. Maybe you're really good at UI stuff. Maybe you're good at fixing weird, threading bugs. And yeah, everybody has their sort of core competency. And it's more helpful to just look at yourself and look at where you were. So when you're learning a new thing, the learning curve is really steep. But the benefit of a steep learning curve is that you do see that kind of marked progress. So just kind of being aware of what you've done and what you're doing now, and being proud of yourself, because we are generally our harshest critics. And if you take a step back and look at yourself through your manager's eyes or through your coworker's eyes, it can just be really illuminating, because they will generally see you in a more, graceful light than maybe yourself. They will give you more credit than you're giving yourself. So number 11 is software development is a team sport. During the pandemic, a lot of us went to work remotely. In many cases, writing code or building an app is a solo activity, or it feels like a solo activity. So you just, you like to go off, solve the thing, and then open the PR. Maybe other people will look at the code, but it just feels like, we like to just go off and do our things and, be in our computer space. At times, it can be really tough to ask for help, especially if you are new to a thing and, you feel bad, or you feel dumb, or you feel like, oh, these shoulds are coming up. I should just know this. I shouldn't have to ask for help. And I think this is exacerbated by kind of just like weird mores around asking for help as developers. So it's like, oh, you should have spent an hour on it. You should time box it. You should have a list of everything you've tried. You should be able to summarize the state of things and your current understanding of things. And there's a place for all of that. Those things can be really helpful. But the people around you are not your enemy. They're not antagonistic. They are there to help you. I really lucky to work in a place where, my coworkers have emphasized this, and I just can get really in my head about, speaking up and asking for help, and I just feel really frustrated and burnt out at times. And then, I'll reach out to a coworker, and they'll just sort of calmly say, oh, that's kind of weird that that's happening. Let's figure out what's going on. And that kind of calm confidence, which I think is a thing that comes with more experience, is what helps sort of quiet those inner self-doubting voices. So the lesson here is just lean on the people around you. And if you are actually working solo, you're at a conference, you're surrounded by Android devs, there is a community here. So yeah, those people are here to help as well. Number 12 is find your corner. So what does this mean? As mobile engineers, we are kind of lucky to have a full stack type experience. So we might be on the UI side building user interfaces. We might be building architecture and models that undergird those user interfaces. And if you're like me, there's stuff you really like doing and stuff you really don't like doing. So I am not great at building UI. That was true even on the iOS side. But I really enjoy the architectural side of things and thinking about how to pass data around and how to just build a really solid system that, is going to work in the future. And I reached out to my manager and I said, I'm feeling really burnt out on the pushing pixels type of work. And are there things that, we need to do, projects we need to work on, tasks that kind of align with, what I'm really feeling excited and energized about. So the message here is not like, don't ever do UI work, or don't ever do the thing that is tough and makes you feel bad and makes you, feel confused. Because doing those things is how you get better at them. But it really helped kind of fight off this impending burnout feeling that I was feeling by, thinking about like, oh, I feel like I get in this flow state when I'm working on like a certain type of task. And how can I work on this in a way that also benefits the company and, moves the product along? And it's not just a binary of UI stuff and architectural stuff. There's lots of different corners of mobile development. There's testing, CI, networking, bug fixes. So just thinking about what you like doing, and in as much as it's possible, trying to just sort of make a case that you can do these things and it can also be good for the company. You're not just going off and doing a thing because you want to do it. And then number 13 is about the importance of intuition. So as I've been learning Android, I kind of mentioned in the technical section, there's the surface level understanding and the deep understanding. And just by kind of listening to my own brain, I was able to sort of sort through and figure out like, okay, what can I maybe table to learn for later versus like what feels more urgent right now? What keeps coming up? What is a really common pattern or, framework or, implementation or something in our system? And so I think, like I said, the universe of things you don't know when you're new to a field is really large, and that can feel overwhelming. But just kind of listening to like what you really feel like you want to understand, or what is like creating this itch in your brain that it's like, oh, like, I may be able to write this code and make the app compile, but I'm not sure I really understand what it's doing under the hood. Listening to that and pursuing that is what can really help you level up. Similarly, that kind of intuition is really helpful in thinking about how you learn new things. So a lot of ways to learn a new thing. There are conferences, there are videos, there's written tutorials, there's books, there's reading the documentation. Maybe you've learned a foreign language before or a new instrument. How did you learn best when you were trying to level up on, a new skill or a new domain? Some like introspection on this point was really helpful for me because, similarly as, there's all these topics and concepts and things that are new and it can feel overwhelming. There's also a lot of resources, which is a good thing and a good problem to have, but thinking about what is going to be most effective for you on your learning journey. For me, it was kind of just diving in, looking at the code, looking at existing patterns in the code, and then tapping into that intuition to say like, oh, I'm able to write this code, but I'm not sure I really understand it. I think just trying to sort of narrow your focus, both in maybe what you're learning, but also how you're learning, is more effective than just trying to do everything, trying to do a little bit of everything. And it's okay to try things and say like, I bought this book, or, I signed up for this online tutorial and it really just doesn't work for me. That's useful. You learn something about how you learn. And that's what's going to help you, learn more. And then the last point here that I want to mostly end on is about the importance of rest. So a lot of the points I made so far are about kind of taking a step back and, practicing introspection and reflection and thinking about, your own understanding of a thing and what's working and what's not working. So similarly here, the important thing is to realize that work may be a lot. It might be really valuable. It might be what you, draw a lot of your identity from, but it's probably not the only thing. You might have a family, you might have pets, you might have hobbies, you might have a community. And we're lucky to generally work for places with generous PTO policies. And I know I felt weird and bad about taking time off if I wasn't going to go anywhere. I was like, well, I'm just going to be at home. I might as well just work. But that is really a recipe for burnout. I had some people say you seem really frustrated at work these days. Maybe it would be helpful to just take a little time off and take a week off. Don't just take a long weekend. And it's kind of cliche to say just take time off and you'll come back and you'll be refreshed and you'll be able to work again and be productive. But it's really not the point. The point is taking a step away is just going to help in many ways. So it's pretty well documented that the best place to solve a programming problem is in the shower or on a dog walk. And I think there's a reason for that. When we're in front of our computers, we just end up in this weird zone, weird unhealthy zone where we're spiraling or we're rabbit holing. And, I sometimes have to force myself to step back, eat lunch, not in front of the computer. I think this is probably really common with the pandemic. But just kind of taking time to do other things that are not work is going to help you mentally and emotionally and help you be better at work if that is, what you are really aiming for. So with that, I want to just kind of summarize some of the top level points of each of these sections going in reverse. So technically what I've learned switching from iOS to Android, it was really helpful in some ways to know Swift and to know a mobile platform when I made the transition. But in some ways it was hampering because I just, naively assumed that things must be the same or, the language must work the same in some ways. It was conversely helpful to me to take a step back, realize that I had these maybe incorrect mental models in my head and to work on, course correcting those. Process-wise, it has been helpful for me as somebody that's new to Android to just reduce unknowns, whether it's in scope or, in the technical frameworks that I'm using, and just kind of trying to focus and stay on task. When I felt most frazzled, it's when I'm trying to do too many things or solve a bug and respond to a Slack message and silence a PagerDuty alert. The other lesson here that I want to mention is that no code is final. I think it was somebody's talk yesterday who mentioned the best type of code is code that can be deleted. So similarly here, no code is final. You can always revise code. You can always take a step back and say what's working, what's not working, and like I said, course correct or just change what you're doing. And finally, the personal learning. So I talked about how learning is painful, and it's really unfortunate, but sometimes there's no way out but through. You just have to lean into the pain of learning. And that's not I'm not saying get over it or don't pay attention to the pain, but realize that, it is just a part of the process. Everybody has gone through it. Maybe we don't talk about it enough, but, there is this sort of amazing portal waiting on the other side. A helpful metaphor I've heard for these kind of thoughts that can overtake is they're like a screensaver. So, you've got your desktop, it's where stuff gets done, you're all productive. And then sometimes when you're just idly thinking, it's like a screensaver takes over the whole screen and you can't do anything. It's just all consuming. But you got to just hit the space bar, hit the space bar, it ends the screensaver. And, it's okay to have the thoughts. They're not everything. They are maybe giving you useful information, but, having the sort of focus on what's actually happening and not just your own self-perception, but how other people perceive you can be really helpful and, lend you some perspective. And finally, lean on your coworkers and lean on your community. It can just be really isolating to learn a new thing, to just feel dumb and bad and, bad at a thing. And, in reality, people might be self-taught, but generally they, even if they're learning by themselves, they're using resources that other people have created. So there's a whole wide world out there. I'm looking at it right now, and we are lucky to work in a profession where people are excited to share what they know, and generally learning new things is kind of a part of what we signed up for. So just kind of reaching out to those people and trying to push through the pain of being vulnerable when you ask for help. So that is everything. I have a bit.ly link to the slides there. We might have a few minutes for questions. You're also welcome to ask in the Slack room, but does anybody have any questions right now? If not, that is also good. Thank you for listening, and I will see you all the rest of today.